It only knows how to do this.
That's it. Hi, everybody. Here we are. We're live. We're live. So we're live with the amazing, fabulous New York Times bestselling author, toured with Oprah Winfrey and Elizabeth Gilbert and all kinds of juicy people, Jan Van Zandt, the fabulous, the one and only, Rob Bell.
You said it was a book club, not a game show.
It's a book club and a game show all in one. Everybody. Okay, so we've got a few people. We've got a lot of people here. This is so fun. Okay, so I just want to mention we're live on all the Celebrate Your Life pages. So just in case you don't know who I am, I'm Liz Dawn. I'm the co-founder of Celebrate Your Life events. And so we're live on a bunch of places right now on the internet. And one of the places that we're live at is the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. And Southwest Institute of Healing Arts is owned, created, and operated by the one and only wonderful Casey Miller. And Casey Miller loves Rob Bell. And Casey Miller absolutely, by the way, adores your book.
Hi, Casey.
Everything is spiritual. So I said to Casey, we should go live on SWIHA's page also. That's the acronym SWIHA. And so we're talking here today about Rob's latest book. And I know, listen, I undress my books. The book is here, and here's the cover and all of my tags, and I write in my books, and I've highlighted all kinds of juicy things. But we are talking today with Rob about his latest book, Everything is Spiritual, Who We Are and What We're Doing Here. Woohoo! Rob's going to give us the answers to life and the universe as we know it. So I'm seeing everybody's welcome from the Netherlands as a game show lover. Oh, wonderful. Casey's here. All right. So I know that a lot of you have read the book, and we've been reading this in the Celebrate Your Life book club. And I would love to go through this. First of all, I want to ask you, Rob Bell, what was like, when you sit down and write a book, and especially with this book, what was your, like, what process did you go before actually sitting down and writing it? Like, did you have this inspiration and start downloading all this information? Like, I've got to get this out. I have to get this out.
Yeah. I always say I've written the books I've written so that I wouldn't spontaneously combust.
Oh.
So it's about curiosity. But at some deep level, something within you rises up that demands expression. And if you don't give it expression, it's almost like something within you dies, which is true about writing, but it's true about business and art and politics and community organizing and economic. Like, something within you wants to be born in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's very mysterious. We can kind of explain, like, think of everybody who's watching right now. We can kind of explain why you do what you do. We can kind of explain why Liz Dawn gives her energies to what Liz Dawn gives her energies to. So it's part explainable. So genetics and environment and the needs around you. And then it's also, the other half of it is deeply, deeply mysterious. Why we drawn to certain things. And for me, probably starting in my early 20s, it was like a rushing river of insights and stories and ideas and observations and teachings. So that's sort of how it's been for a long time. Mm-hmm. I get this idea and I have to make it for me before anyone else, especially in this book, almost more than anything I've ever done.
And so what brought you to write this particular book? And can you kind of encapsulate it for everybody listening?
Yeah.
I'm assuming everybody's read it. Yes.
Yeah. Originally, it started with the section at the end about your parents having sex and the little fella and all that. Originally, I was like, what if the book started with, in the beginning, your parents had sex, and the whole book was an elucidation of that whole section within all of these other observations about quantum physics, about the nature of our expanding universe, the stuff that's all in there, but it was flat. It was ideas, and some of them were funny, and some of them were provocative, and some of them, even that idea that humans are the latest layer to emerge in the evolution of the universe. And so who we are, we're the latest, most complex layer to emerge. And what we're doing here is when we come together, something new is formed in the universe that the universe has never seen, in the same way that atoms were new. So I had all that, but it was just big Rob Bell ideas. Do you know what I mean? And I walked away from the book, which is why I love your question, because to me, there's the what you made, but then there's the how you made it. I literally walked away from the book because I was like, it's just more big ideas. And then one day out of nowhere was like, remember my grandma used to keep cash in her bra? That was so weird.
I love that part.
Why did she do that?
We all do.
And
all girls
suddenly
do.
I was on her. You wouldn't believe, by the way, how many interviews for this, since this book came out, people are like, yeah, my grandma kept cash in her bra too. And suddenly I'm back there on the porch with her. And I realize, oh, we used to sit there after dinner, the two of us, sometimes in silence, in between talking. And the wind would blow in over the field. And it was like I was right back there on the porch. And I was like, oh, there was a wordless grace. Like, everything is okay, even if it isn't, that came from her presence. And she was kind of a funky, unusual woman. But nevertheless, there was some sort of experience I had of wordlessness and grace. And I start just tears. Like, oh, that shaped me. So all this stuff, this work I've been doing for 30 years, all this stuff, these things I talk about and all that, I had these experiences starting at a young age that shaped me. There's a story behind all this stuff that I do. And she actually lost her first husband at 34. One of her boys, my dad's brother, dies. So on that porch, I was born into a drama, as we all are. And suddenly, Liz Dawn, it became, how did I get here? Oh, I came from these people in these places in this soil, but we all do. And it's wondrous that we're even here. Like all the stuff that is like, that's a little weird, and man, please don't bring that up, and that's embarrassing. And what about it suddenly became the most interesting thing ever. Suddenly became, which is actually one of the things with the event Liz and I are doing with you all next week, that imagination begins with wonder and awe about the details of your own story, that are often the things that cause people to wince and be embarrassed and be like, oh God, don't bring up the 80s, please. Or you see a photo, you know what I mean? You see a photo of yourself and you remember the pain from that moment, or somebody brings up the name of somebody and you're like, God, that person hurt me so bad. And yet we're here. So whatever it was, all of that shaped us into who we are. And you can read it as all these weird pieces that you don't know what to do with, or you can read it through the lens of wonder and awe. So in some ways, the book, it's a book, but it's also a feeling that's like the energetic imprint of the creator is in the creation. The book has an energetic imprint of, I'm going to tell you obviously the book is like a whole series of embarrassing, awkward stories. I'm going to tell you all this stuff, but just a millimeter below the surface is this crackling, humming spirit that just never stops reminding you it's okay. There's something new that wants to be birthed out of even this mess. It's good to be you. It's good to be here. The great poet Rilke said, "To be here is glorious." That's what I wanted people to pick up from the book.
To be here is glorious.
Yeah.
Even the style in which, and I just want to acknowledge, we've got Reverend Jackie Fernandez here, and she is a unity minister. And hi, Jackie. And she's saying, thank you for staying in the conversation of scripture, grace, and curiosities.
Ooh. That's a
Love
good trio there.
that.
When those trios start dancing.
And Jackie, Reverend Jackie is amazing. Well, there were so many beautiful things about this book. First of all, you got me in the beginning. Like I was just drawn in. And if any of you have any questions for Rob, by the way, I'm looking at all the comments. So you can start posting questions if you have any questions. I am keeping one eye on the comments. But you really, for me, I just was completely drawn into the story. And then you would tell a little bit about your story and what's going on. And then you would jump to a teaching, and then you jump to something else. And like, but. And then you come back to it again. And I was like, wait a second. I was right there with your grandmother and right there about the brother. And there's just such beautiful pieces in the book. Has anybody ever read any of the book to you?
Yeah, that actually has. Actually, past couple of weeks, my wife, Kristen, was like, let's do Robcast episodes. She's like, I'm going to read you your book, she's like, I'm going to read the parts I like. And
That's what I want to do.
But it's interesting. It's interesting what you said about because structure always submits to spirit. So there's a spirit of something that wants to be birthed, and then structures serve spirit, not spirit serving structures. And we've all been in that when you're sitting there going, what is this meeting? What are we doing here? It's got all this structure and form and order, but what's the energy? What's the animating? What is the point? Is a way of saying, what's the spirit of this? And then we've all been around things. There was tons of spirit, but it was a chaotic wreck. But this, I wanted this to feel like when it loops and then it repeats, and then there's a series of stories that seem to be related, almost like a constellation of stories that you pick up something in the middle of them. I wanted it to feel like memory feels. So,
and it does.
Right. So it's slightly disjointed at points because I wanted it to have that sort of hiccup feeling about how your heart interprets your own past. Like I remember that event and I know it shaped me for sure, but the actual details, they're important, but it was the thing happening in those details. Here's how it went. It was somehow related in that time period to that. In my experience, that's how I wanted the book to feel like life actually feels when you reflect on who you are and how you got here. So it had to have no chapters, and it had to loop and almost step back from itself. Then it's in itself. Then it's caught up in the thing. Then it's analyzing it. Then it's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and when I first picked up the book, I always look through a book and I do this. I smell a book. I think every book has its own smell. I do. I love that. Don't you love smell? I mean, yes. Yeah. You've got it in your hand. I'm a book person, not a.
Oh, me too. Oh my goodness.
And it paints such exquisite pictures. I mean, so I'm going to read you one of my favorite parts.
Oh, good. Let's do that.
Okay, I'm going to do a Kristen because I do want you to kind of expound on this part of it. Here we go. So it's on the bottom of page 169. Do you know what part I'm talking about? I'm kidding, of course.
By the way, page 169. So I would have been like 37. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. No. I think you're younger. I think you're a little bit younger. But this is just, I mean, you write so beautifully and it's really interesting because in your emails, you write the same way. You have that same style of writing in your emails.
Yeah.
That's really cute. I picked up the book and said, it looks just like his emails.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, to be honest.
So for those of you who don't have the book yet, and Tanya's posting the link to the book for those of you who weren't reading it along with us this month. But you can kind of, okay, which way am I going? You can kind of see like am I still blurry?
Yeah.
I'm blurry, you guys. I'm sorry. It doesn't look blurry to me, but everybody's telling me I'm blurry. All right, so here we go. And it's hard to jump into the middle here, but I'm going to. So on the bottom of 169, everyone, grab your books. These phenomena at the heart of the human experience that fill us with joy and meaning and love were never about fairness or making sense or how serious you could be or how well you could prove your worth or what you could accomplish or what you could get people to do. The workers all get paid the same because you can't divide the infinite. I started to see what all these yogis and Buddhas and monks and nuns and sages and gurus across the ages were smiling about. This experience we're all having here, this event we were born into, it's profoundly, deeply, fundamentally off, odd, strange, entangled, connected. It doesn't follow any of the rules we thought were the rules for how it works. A particle disappears in one place and then appears in another place without traveling the distance in between. It's like the whole thing is winking at us. And the ones who move us, inspire us, spur us on, well, they're in on the joke. I love that. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about that passage.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, when I started out as a pastor, I was in my early 20s, and I didn't know what do you know in your early 20s? And the job I quickly discovered was to join people in suffering. That was a big chunk of the job, is you get called on any given day. I never knew when the phone would ring. Hey, so-and-so died. They need you at the funeral home. So-and-so's in prison, and they need somebody with a credential to visit them. So-and-so's in the hospital. So-and-so just lost their job, and they're coming in 5 minutes because they need somebody to talk to. They need a pastor. So what happened at a young age is I was surrounded. Part of the job was basically you were joining people in the most intimate experiences of life. You know what I mean? It was like a front row seat. Normally you have these concentric rings relationships, and the closest people to you are the people you bring into those moments. But I would end up in that ring over and over again. And of course, when you see that, well, we got to help people. That's what I mean. We got to save them. We got to get them connected. And that seriousness, we're going to change the world, which I've seen in humanitarian aid. I've seen it in healthcare. I've seen it in politics. Like, that's a wonderful impulse to want to make a difference in the world. But what happened is I just realized taking yourself that seriously, like I'm here to save things, it's like a crushing weight at some level. Mm-hmm. But what I kept noticing is the people who actually helped over a long period of time and didn't burn out or get cynical or become a shell of themselves, they were in tune with some truth about this experience we're having here on this floating ball of rock hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour.
By the way, when you wrote that in the book, it's like, it like freaked me out because I didn't realize it was that fast, you know?
But there is, right. I mean, the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour. Paris
don't tell me. I can't think about it.
Going 600 miles an hour. Right. I mean, there's the same percentage of salt water in the water in your mother's womb as the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, this whole thing, that there is a consciousness itself. You and I are having this conversation, but we're aware that we're having a conversation. Right. And our consciousness is how we are aware of everything we've ever experienced in our life. And yet, can you hold your consciousness in your hand? No. So it has the qualities of nothing, and yet it has the qualities of everything.
Everything, right.
So there are these paradoxes that are so obvious and close, all the smart people miss them. And I found myself again and again almost wanting everybody to go, stop talking about the lease on your car or getting a sandwich. Stop. You're getting buried by the details of this thing when wonder and awe is the starting point.
Say that again.
I just kept meeting people who were completely buried by the details and complexities of life, which are real, and tensions and bills and politics and all that. Yes. And yet, underneath all that, we're here. We're having this experience. I just noticed that in every tradition, the wise ones, that was always their starting point. And they kept that starting point and they didn't lose it as they then interacted with all of the most pressing needs of the day. I was doing an event with a Dalai Lama. They put several of us on a stage and anybody could ask any question they wanted. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama a question. I swear to you, Liz Dawn, he sat there for 30 seconds and didn't say anything, like with kind of a thinking look on his face. And then into the microphone, he said, and the whole arena like leans in like, oh, this one's going to be good. And the Dalai Lama, 45 seconds of silence, grabs the mic and says, I don't know. That's what he did. That's what he said. That's what he said. And the Bishop Tutu was sitting between me and the Dalai Lama and nods like, yeah, that's a good point. You know what I mean?
You're like, ah.
I was like, this is the Premier League. There's nowhere to go from here. And ask a question. The Dalai Lama responds, I don't know. So there's something about humility. There's something about taking a breath and just being present to whatever it is. And that the modern world, the engine of the modern world has been mastery. So plan it, stand in dominance over it, exploit it. I mean, you think about the fundamental relationship with the soil for the past, 50, 100 years. Industrialized societies have had a take whatever you need from the soil. Don't protect it. Don't think about it in terms of stewardship or sustainability. That's dominance and mastery. And yet, the moments in life that most grab us and move us and take us somewhere are never experiences of dominance and mastery. They're experiences of being caught up. Like you with a good book. You're not like, I'm going to crush this book. You know what I mean? You're like, no, I'm going to be, or if Kristen and I have 3 kids, with our 3 kids sitting in the hospital, when you meet your kid for the first time, it is as wide as the universe. It is as small as this little bundle of flesh and blood. You are not standing in mastery and analyzing and, oh, look, another human being. You're lost in something. You're floating down a river. You're flying over. That's something that's profoundly been lost. And in some ways, the entire book is an invitation to rediscover that. Is the technical word for it.
Rediscover that.
Because we tried cynicism. We gave cynicism a good shot. People grew ironic mustaches, you know what I mean, and went like, rolled their eyes. Everybody tried that. Stand at a distance from it, critique it, tell everybody how lame it is. We did that. We did cynicism. Didn't work. Doesn't really get you where you want to go. So, yeah, wonder and awe. That's
no, it keeps
game.
you stuck. I mean, that keeps you stuck.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah. And what's interesting about cynicism is it presents itself as wisdom, but it actually usually comes from a wound. So it presents itself as wisdom, which is, I've seen it. You got to understand, people who are in, like, can get it, that right there, and you know that, and that. Like, and there's a time and a place for skepticism. Nevertheless, cynicism presents itself as a world-weary sort of, trust me on this one. And yet, generally, what happens is the person tried something, and it didn't go how they thought it was going to go, and they got their heart broken. And now, if you hold it at a distance, that which you hold at a distance can't break your heart. So it's like, I don't want to feel that again. So I just always keep it at a distance. And cynicism is a wonderful way to just hold everything at arm's length. But ultimately, it's not where the action is.
So you don't get hurt. I love how in the book, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to post. And Casey just shared such deep wisdom. It speaks to exactly what the Swiha, she runs Swiha community speaks. And she said, thank you for articulating the magic and mystery so well. I agree. It's like poetry, reading your book. It's like you're taken on this just such an interesting journey through, and I love how vulnerable you are about being. And I don't know the total vernacular for this. In Judaism, I would call you a conservative rabbi, and maybe I would call you a conservative minister. But
Conservative.
in the beginning, were you
Oh.
fairly conservative in following the law, the letter of the Bible in your teachings? Because that's what it sounded
What a
like.
great question. Well, actually, right away, I had discovered like Midrash by 25. Add some stories. Like the white spaces around the letters, that's where all the fun is. So I think by 25, 26, 27, I was already winking. And I had seen that sort of stilted literalism that saw it almost like an owner's manual. I remember people telling me that, like, well, the Bible's, the scriptures are like an owner's manual. And I would always think, yeah, but no one reads an owner's manual for fun. An owner's manual is the most boring book ever. So you got to come up with a better metaphor. So I had been around, I had observed some of that. It doesn't matter what I think. I'm just telling you what it says. You better do it. God says it. We believe it. But no, it was already by mid to late 20s. I remember reenacting the Day of Atonement, and I had convinced these older women with sewing machines to make linen ephods, and I convinced this guy to carry a live goat through the crowd. And so I remember reenacting Torah almost like bad community theater. Do you know what I mean?
My goodness.
I remember doing the Day of Atonement, and I had the guy carry the goat. The scapegoat goes out into the wilderness.
Yes,
I remember having a welder from Caledonia, Michigan named Ron, dressed in full high priest, take a live goat and carry it out of the building, and then had a band queued up to play some sort of disco-ish jam so that we could announce the goat has left the building, and then the place broke out in like a dance party thing.
On Yom Kippur. Wait a second.
I know. So I was
Judaism at the same time. You were studying Old Testament.
That's what happened. That's what happened is after one of my first sermons, literally 25 years old, one of my first sermons, and a guy comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, you totally missed it. Like that whole thing." I was like, "Missed what?" He's like, "That whole sermon. You like, there's all this stuff going on there that you missed it." He's like, "Jesus was Jewish." And I was like, "I think he was a Christian." Kind of joking, but also kind of messing around. He's like, No. He's a first century Jewish rabbi. So everything he's doing is commentary on Torah. So like that thing that you just did, you just went like, I don't know why he does X or Y. Well, we know why he did X or Y, because he was in a tradition. And I'm telling you, Liz Dawn, it melted. I knew this, but it melted my brain. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, who's Heschel? Wait. Tikkun Olam? And honestly, my understanding of spirituality really came home when I understood that the lineage I came from, it stood on the shoulders of an earlier lineage. And it was the rabbis, because in the Christian world I grew up in, or like when I went to seminary, it was systematic theology. God is A, God is B, God is C. You know what I mean? How to pin down the butterfly so it can't fly. But honestly, Liz, it was when I went farther back to the rabbis that I came home. Honestly, that the assumption of mystery, the earthy, sweaty, sexy wine, granular this worldness of it. Not when you die and go somewhere else, but the reordering of this world in a way in which there's enough for all. Honestly,
Right.
There was a period there. Ellen Frankel's The Five Books of Miriam. I mean, I just tore through. I gave myself an education. Yeah, that it changed everything. Oh, if you would have met me at 29, I would have been like, Shlomo Gorin says. I mean, I just would. I was, you know what I mean? I was.
Rabbi Shlomo.
And honestly, what happened in the world that I came from is all these Christians went, oh, this was what was missing. Even that awful right-wing Christian evangelical alliance with American empire that just makes us all want to throw up in our mouth. Mm-hmm. Even the number of Christians who are like, oh, this is why that is so horrible. Because this book comes from a people who were very cynical of empire and violence. Mm-hmm. They had been on the receiving end of violence and persecution so many times that this book is profoundly cynical of the people who have the chariots. Yes. I remember, I mean, this still happens. People come up and say, I've been in church my whole life. The background you gave on that scripture, I always knew I wasn't getting the full story.
Right.
I mean, people will get angry. They'd be like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Yeah.
Because everybody's reading it so literally, as opposed to reading, as you say, as a story, as something that was,
and
something
honestly,
that love.
Yeah,
because it's coming from fear.
And yes, absolutely. And historically, this giant, massive, so loud and clangy Christian tradition, it cut itself off from its own roots. Mm-hmm. And that was historically a really, really, really destructive thing. That is still, I'm not even, whatever religion, whatever that even is now, it's simply in the cultural air at some level. If you're, and so, in some ways, some of my work has simply been, what's it mean to be human? And look at these extraordinary traditions that have such wonderful insights into what it even means to be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jackie has a question.
Hi, Jackie.
She wants to know, when did you discover and embrace the divine feminine? And was that in your Midrash methodology, or was there another experience or moment?
Yeah. Wow. That happened. Yeah. Mid-20s. I remember, the divine, there's a sacred feminine here floating through. I remember even those Hebrew words, spirit, Torah, are feminine words. My wife Kristen's very strong. She's grounded, a deeply intuitive. She says she's the rudder. You don't see her, but she steers the ship. So
she and I would get along well.
When we got married, we had this sense that life is an adventure, and we found someone to go on the adventure with. So it never felt like, how do you stay married, or it always felt like, oh, we're like following something here. And my lived experience with her and this extraordinarily strong but different energy that she brought, I remember in my 20s beginning to have theological language for the experience I was having with her, which was, oh, there are these energies, these masculine and feminine energies that are present in all of us. And even the Genesis poem, the divine male and female, even what we consider gender, is something even slightly different than even these energies, which are both how the world gets created. But I would actually say it was Kristen and then I would look around me, and obviously a woman doing the same job as a man should be paid the same. Like, obviously women should be able to teach, preach, lead, be president. I remember that happened. And when I was first a pastor, it was in West Michigan, which is a very conservative area. But I remember right away being like, oh, I got to say, well, I talk about it in the book. Like I started talking about the sacred feminine. Yeah, I started a church, and then a couple of years later did a whole series of teaching on sacred feminine, and they organized to have me removed for such things. And I was like, oh, yeah, what something that you would think is so obvious, like Jackie's question. Oh, yeah, yeah. There's this sacred masculine, sacred feminine. There's a broken masculine, broken feminine. These energies exist in a yin-yang sort of delicate, lovely, powerful balance, and not everybody's even ready for that. But it's central to how we each even got here. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love how you describe it in the book. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, wait a second. He's doing something progressive. Yeah. And then all of a sudden these people are shunning. And you guys have to get the book. You guys all
it was surreal. It's also interesting. I think about Jackie's question. We have an 11-year-old girl named Violet who announced to me the other day. She said, "Dad, I'm a strong, independent woman." And she goes to school right here in the middle of LA, and just watching her growing up in this massive, diverse, global city, and even watching for Kristen and then Violet within one generation. For Violet, care for the earth is like duh. The other day, we went to get her new shoes because she hasn't been wearing shoes for 6 months because she's been indoors with pandemic and her feet have grown, so she has no shoes. So we took her to get shoes. And Kristen said something. She was like, well, I don't know the pronouns for that person. And we were like, that is so like her sensitivities to how the world works, to the vastness of all these different stories, how strong and fierce she is. She has 2 older brothers, and they're like, one of them will come in the room and she'll be like, "What's up, bro?" And we'll just, oh my God, I laugh. We have this dog we got the shelter. We got it. Barking Bitches is the rescue shelter in our neighborhood. We got this dog that part pit bull, part you don't know what, but the dog sits next to her all day long for her Zoom school. We're like, this girl. So one of the things about Jackie's question is I'm just watching the world my daughter is coming up in, where her power, her strength, her contribution is like just, like it's like the idea that would even be at all in dispute for her would just be like, what?
I love that. I love that. It's such a different and refreshing perspective than I certainly grew up with. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I just want to talk about, and for those of you who aren't aware, Rob is doing an event with Elizabeth Gilbert, otherwise known as Liz, but not to be confused with this Liz, okay? It's Liz Gilbert, not Liz Dawn. And they're doing an event on Halloween. Crazy and creative day to do an event. We're doing an online virtual live party all day long. So do you want to speak a little bit about what you're going to be teaching there? Kind of give us a little bit of a teaser. And I think we've got some people putting up the link, so you can put the link up there, Tanya, if any of you.
Oh my word. Liz and I met in September of 2014. And within 5 minutes, it was like, are we brother and sister? And we're just finding out. There was like this connection, and we started doing events together. One time, right after the election in 2016, we were doing an event in Brooklyn where we sat on stools and talked all day. And right before we went on, we were like, we should talk about the election. Yeah, we should. Okay, let's go out there. We'll talk about the election. Then we'll do everything that we had planned to do. And we did an hour and a half without coming up for air on the election. And at the end, we were like, that was some pretty good material. I know, that was some of our best work yet. So for us, this Halloween event together for a day is like our idea of a good time. So you can join us or not, but we're going to be having a great time. And one of the things that came out of it when we started talking about this with you, Liz, is Liz Gilbert and I have been talking about imagination, and how for many people imagination can be a very, can even be sort of a squishy, hey, just everything is possible. But imagination also has a dark side. You can cook up all sorts of stories that aren't helping you. Imagination can also come from places that you would almost instinctually want to avoid, like your past, your history, your wounds, your regrets. So we realized we had all sorts of things to say about imagination that we hadn't heard other people say. So we'll be talking back and forth. We'll be taking people through exercises to help them understand and see how imagination actually functions. We'll take some questions. Oh yeah, she and I can kill a day. We can kill a day with pure joy. That's
like
not
that.
hard. That's not hard.
Well, I was talking, I don't know, it was a couple of months ago. We were on Zoom doing an interview or something. And I said to you, well, imagination, what do you really want to teach people about imagination? And you shared something so beautiful. I'd never, ever thought about this concept. And you shared about when someone's going through a deep loss in their life.
Oh, yeah.
They've lost a loved one, deep trauma loss. How do you begin to imagine a new future? How do you begin to imagine something being different in your life? And I never thought about it that way, but that was so beautiful, because I recently had a friend pass, and thinking about, well, how does her mother now imagine moving forward? How is that space going to be filled or not filled, or using my imagination creatively to kind of think outside the box of how I would normally process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because there's a long-standing relationship between suffering and creativity. And not suffering like the tortured artist, not that cliche. Suffering meaning plan A blew up in your face. So the thing that was supposed to keep going, it's not here. The person left. The business failed. Whatever happened, plan A isn't here anymore, which by default means something new has to arise. So there's the grief, there's the loss, there's the giving expression to the pain. But often the seeds of imagination are right there, because now you have to come up with something. And coming up with something, another word for that is creativity. And what creativity requires is some form of imagination. So for a number of people, when they look back on their life, it was the loss and heartache and pain that actually produced the things they never would have cooked up on their own.
That's true.
And like even in this period that we're all going through right now, this is how new things get birthed. The thing that is no longer here. So you have to by necessity create. And that will always involve some form of imagination. Yeah, these are all very counterintuitive, yet they're very ancient patterns that are more true now than ever. And we'll talk about that on Halloween.
Yes, we're going to have a great time. Come join us if you're moved to. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. And I
love talking to you.
Oh, this is great. I have all of these like areas earmarked in the book that are like my favorites.
Oh, that means the world.
Send them to Kristen so she can read them on your podcast.
That just means the world.
Oh, it's just beautiful. Your description of things and the way I'm not a wordsmith in the way that you and Liz Gilbert are. And you really brought me in. You brought me into that space, that mesmerizing space of spirit, that mesmerizing like stillness, that pure consciousness, that, okay, I'm not reading this with my mind. There's no mind here.
Oh, yeah. That was, oh my goodness.
That's how it felt to me.
That means the world to me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Casey, for letting us pop into the Sweeha Facebook page.
Thank you, everybody. Right. Thank you, Sweeha.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.